She takes the cue well enough and slowly begins to undo his pants. He shuffles up on his elbows to watch her. She stops and throws him another glance, only to find his look of interest. She goes back to undoing his pants. It does not take long before she is hooking her delicate fingers into the hem of his underwear. She looks up again, this time with a certain glee on her face. She pulls down his pants and underwear alike to free his manhood. She lets her eyes wander off his face, down his physique and onto his crotch. She has to stop and clear her throat as her vision lands on his manhood. No wonder she felt him straining a bit with her on top. That thing is nowhere near fit to be contained by clothing. She simply stares at it for a while. Not very professional. Then again, they have long since passed that stage. Reinhard holds back a chuckle and does what he can to sound serious as he speaks. Something wrong, Fräulein? Angela spins on the spot and gives him a wild look. She almost staggers as she takes a step, but recovers gracefully. She leans in over him, this time with both hands against his chest.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There seems to be a rather rigid issue. I'm going to take a closer look.
She trails her fingers down his body again, forming claws with her hands but not touching him with her nails. The softest clawing ever to happen in the world. He lets out a long, low sound of comfort. She comes to a stop on his stomach and lifts her delicate hands to wrap one of them around his member. He watches with a smile as she weighs it in her hand with a certain look of amazement on her face. If he was tired and beat before, it has all been swept away by that curious little look she is currently sporting. She throws a glance at his face, says nothing, and focuses her attention back on his erection. She grips it with her other hand and begins a careful stroke. She marvels at his manhood for a good few moments. He spends that time being just as interested in her expressions. Hier kommen, Fräulein. I want to see your face. She looks to him and nods while peeling her skirt down her legs, a sight to behold. Her pantyhose is in fact not fully covering. She's wearing a lace garter belt clipped onto the tops of the hose stockings. The rest of her underwear is so minimal it could hardly be called clothing. Still, with its minimal size, her lace panties complement her curves perfectly. Reinhard has a difficult moment deciding if he is impressed or turned on, quickly realizing it is, of course, both. Angela lithely climbs up on the bed and soon hovers above him on all fours. He looks into her eyes and lets his hands wander over her body once again. She lets out a pleased sound of her own and leans in to press her lips against his. He accepts the kiss without hesitation and wraps his broad arms around her. She lays down in his grip and presses herself against him. She quickly finds a comfortable position, resting his member tightly against her hidden sex. Lips on lips, soon tongues dance, a long, passionate kiss. He rests his hands on her behind for the duration of the long kiss. Finally, she breaks it with a hot breath against his cheek. She gives him a mysterious little smile and starts to roll her hips. His hot member against her already wet panties make them both hum in delight. He takes great handfuls of her behind, groping her as she bucks against him. She is grinding faster and faster. Her face carries an exceptional expression of lust. He locks eyes with her as he gently grasps the wisp-like fabric of her underwear to pull at it. She raises a brow, gives him a quick peck on the lips, and then rises. She tugs at her own underwear while laying down next to his huge frame. She swiftly does an acrobatic kicking move, and before he can even react, she is sitting on top of him again, panties in hand. She waves them from side to side, pinched between two fingers. With the final sway of the tiny piece of cloth, she drops them. He runs his hands up and down her thighs while moving his own hips. She sits straddled on his massive manhood, and her juices is already making it slick. She pants, he grunts. He leans up and forward, gripping her hips. Jetzt, ist Zeit. A giggle slips out of her. How very romantic of him. Then again, she's rather to the point as well. She lifts herself up along with a deep breath. He grasps his member and positions it for her. She bends so that his tip is prodding against her soaked labia. She moans through closed lips and pushes back against him, carefully. His tip enters her and she leans forward to quickly repeat the motion. She moves on top of him for a little while, getting used to his size and spreading her wetness. He reaches up her chest, pulling her sweater along, up over her ample bust. She soon assists him with removing the shirt. Now the only thing covering her is a nearly transparent lace bra. He takes in the sight as she pushes against his member again. A deep blush is writing her face. Taking him inside is more difficult than she thought. He is simply enormous. She bites her lip and throws her arms around his neck as she slowly bounces up and down in his lap. The angle is making it both difficult and intense, but she is taking more and more of him. With a particularly daring move, she brings herself down a bit harder, forcing more of him in and eliciting a long, loud moan from her. He grips her and holds her steady. "Easy now, Liebchen, don't hurt yourself." She looks to him with half-closed eyes and a smug little smile.
Trust me, I'm a physician.
With that, she pushes some more and moans again. She is tight and he is big. She manages maybe half his length, not really optimal for the position. She supports herself on him and he easily holds her steady. A moment of awkward movement. She attempts to work up a rhythm and he tries to follow. Finally, they match strokes. She bounces up and down in his grip. He seems to have figured out just how much she can take in. She pants and whimpers as she is filled completely again and again. She claws at the back of his head and down his back, this time with nails. He kisses her neck and picks up the pace a bit. Her movements are more or less taken over and guided by him. She can do little but to hang on to him and moan loudly. She presses herself tightly against him and revels in the touch of his muscular frame. He picks up the pace, giving her quick, deep strokes. After a good few minutes of intense penetration, he slows down. A shiver goes through her entire body. She nibbles on his ear and whispers,
I think I've come 3 times already.
He chuckles very shortly, then lifts her, his solid member leaving her, and she gasps at the empty feeling. He puts her down and watches her shake a bit before settling down on top of him. She grabs his manhood and strokes it.
Then what are we going to do with your rigid condition, Reinhardt?
He smiles for her. "You are the physician, Fräulein Ziegler." She licks her lips in thought for a little while, her one-handed treatment skillful and pleasant. She seems to come to a conclusion and looks up to him while slowly proceeding to crawl down his body, in between his legs. The medical bed might seem small for him, but with her size, she can quite comfortably fit to position herself for the treatment. She raises his members straight up, and he rises on his elbows again to observe her every movement. She gives him another glance with her sapphire eyes, and then gives the shaft of his manhood a long lick. From its base to its tip, she flicks her tongue to end the lick and then instantly suckles on his tip. She can feel him throb into her mouth. She slowly lowers herself, just as careful as the last time she took him in. She stretches her jaw till near unpleasantness before she pulls back. She strokes him at a moderate pace and goes back to suckling on his tip. He responds well, even lets out a grunt of pleasure. She tries again, this time taking less of him into her mouth in favor of being able to lick. She picks up a pace with licking down his shaft with as much of him in her mouth as she can manage. Her head bops up and down. She licks and sucks like it was something she was meant for. It is his turn to shiver. A quake goes through him, along with an audible grunt. Angela has to pull back as the first thick wad of cum fills her mouth. It dribbles over her lower lip and out the sides of her mouth. She attempts to swallow as much of it as possible when the second shot comes. Another thick, slippery load lands across her nose and left eye, covering her glasses in semen. She wipes her mouth with the back of her hand before snickering softly.
Mein Gott, Reinhardt. Been under a lot of stress lately.
He stares at her for a moment, speechless. That did not exactly go as he thought it would. Excuse me, Fräulein. She gives him a sunny smile while removing her glasses. She hangs them on one of the medical arms as she crawls up his body. When finally face to face, she gives him another cum-stained grin.
I think I've worked out the rigid situation. I would like to ask for assistance with cleanup.
He looks into her beautiful blue eyes. She continues.
There is a shower and bath